In the heart of Harare in 2013, Robert Mugabe stood before a cheering crowd, his voice sharp and steady. Zimbabwe's president, a subtle dictator in a fitted suit, raised his clenched fist. This man, Obama, claims to be African, but he dances to the tune of his white masters, he exclaimed, his words piercing the air. He encourages our adversaries to split and recolonize us. We demand he back off and recognize Zimbabwe's right to self-determination. The audience exploded, brandishing banners, as Mugabe's accusation against U.S. President Barack Obama reverberated across the country. It was a crucial moment in African history, a battle of visions for the continent's destiny. The tension began years earlier when Obama took office in 2009. Zimbabwe was already a nation on its knees, battered by hyperinflation that had peaked at 500 billion% in 2008, rendering the national currency worthless. Mugabe's land reform program, launched in 2000 to seize white-owned farms and redistribute them to black Zimbabweans, had been both a rallying cry for justice and a catalyst for economic collapse. Agriculture, the country's backbone, crumbled as farms fell into disarray, and Western nations, led by the United States, imposed sanctions. Initiated in 2003 under George W. Bush, these measures, asset freezes and travel bans on Mugabe and his ZANU-PF allies, were a response to human rights abuses and electoral fraud, particularly the violent 2008 elections that left over 300 dead and forced opposition leader Morgan Tsvangirai to withdraw. Mugabe, ever the defiant anti-colonialist, saw Obama's presidency as a chance for reprieve. As the first black U.S. president, Obama might, Mugabe hoped, soften America's stance. But Obama's administration upheld the sanctions, viewing Mugabe's regime as a stain on democratic ideals. In a 2011 United Nations speech, Mugabe struck back, his voice booming. The United States and its allies imposed illegal sanctions on Zimbabwe, punishing us for daring to reclaim our land. Let Africa determine its own destiny. Though he avoided naming Obama directly, the target was clear. In a 2015 interview with Zimbabwe's state-run ZBC, Mugabe sharpened his attack. Obama is not African enough to understand our struggle. He sits in Washington, imposing sanctions that starve our people, while claiming to care for democracy. Mugabe's rhetoric was more than bravado. It was a calculated narrative. He accused Obama of funding Morgan Tsvangirai's Movement for Democratic Change, MDC, to orchestrate regime change, pointing to America's support for civil society and independent media. The 2008 election violence, where ZANU-PF militias brutalized MDC supporters, had drawn Obama's ire, and Mugabe's paranoia grew. To him, Obama was not a fellow African descendant, but a puppet of Western imperialism, betraying the continent's liberation legacy. Across the Atlantic, in the cool corridors of Washington, Barack Obama responded with measured resolve. His administration saw Mugabe's Zimbabwe as a cautionary tale of authoritarianism. In a 2009 speech at the America-Africa Business Summit, Obama spoke broadly but pointedly. Africa doesn't need strongmen. It needs strong institutions. We will not stand by while governments suppress their people's aspirations for freedom. The words were a rebuke to Mugabe's 30-year rule, marked by censorship, rigged elections, and violence. In 2011, after Mugabe's UN tirade, the America State Department issued a statement. Zimbabwe's government continues to undermine democratic processes through human rights abuses. Sanctions will remain until meaningful reforms are enacted. Obama's policy was not one of open confrontation but of persistent pressure. In 2011, the America expanded sanctions, adding more ZANU-PF officials and state-owned enterprises to the list, accusing them of violating the 2009 Global Political Agreement, a fragile power-sharing deal between Mugabe and Tsvangirai. By 2013, as Zimbabwe faced another election, The Obama administration's State Department condemned the process, stating, "The United States does not believe the results reflect the will of the Zimbabwean people." Mugabe, incensed, accused Obama of arrogance in a post-election speech, vowing to deepen ties with China and Russia, nations unburdened by demands for democracy. In Harare, Mugabe's defiance translated into action. The 2013 elections became a battleground, with ZANU-PF militias and security forces unleashing a wave of intimidation. In Mashonaland, villages burned as MDC supporters were beaten, their homes reduced to ash. Human Rights Watch documented 60 cases of politically motivated violence, with hundreds arrested or tortured. Mugabe's government, fueled by fears of America-backed regime change, cracked down on journalists and activists, labeling them American agents. The U.S. sanctions, while targeted at elites, cast a long shadow. International banks, wary of penalties, shunned Zimbabwe, choking its access to foreign currency. Investors fled, and Western aid dwindled. Zimbabwe received just $7 million in America aid in 2010, compared to $44 million for Zambia. Mugabe's pivot to China brought some relief, a $1 billion mining deal by 2015, but it was a drop in the bucket. The sanctions, combined with Mugabe's mismanagement, crippled the economy. The Zimbabwean dollar was abandoned in favor of the America dollar, but wages stagnated, and goods disappeared from shelves. Mugabe's rhetoric, while rallying his base, deepened Zimbabwe's isolation, leaving it a pariah in Western eyes. While Mugabe and Obama sparred on the global stage, the Zimbabwean people bore the weight of their feud. In the dusty streets of Harare, families queued for hours to buy a single loaf of bread, its price inflated beyond reach. The economic collapse, worsened by sanctions and Mugabe's policies, left over 70% of Zimbabweans below the poverty line by 2015. According to the World Bank, unemployment soared above 80%, and the once thriving nation became a shadow of its former self, its fields barren from the chaotic land reforms. The health system crumbled, a grim testament to the feud's toll. A cholera outbreak, which began in 2008 but lingered into Obama's term, claimed over 4,000 lives by 2010, with 98,000 infections. Harare's water treatment systems, starved of funds and chemicals due to financial isolation, failed. Paraniatwa Hospital, once a regional beacon, operated at 20% capacity by 2012, its wards empty of drugs and doctors. The U.S. sanctions, though not directly targeting humanitarian aid, limited Zimbabwe's ability to import essentials, as global banks refused to process transactions. Mothers cradled dying children, their cries drowned by the silence of a broken system. Mugabe's paranoia, stoked by his feud with Obama, fueled repression. In 2013, ZANU-PF militias roamed rural areas, targeting MDC supporters. Amnesty International reported 200 cases of torture, with families displaced and homes torched. In Chitawangwiza, a mother named Miriam recounted how her son, an MDC activist, was beaten and left for dead, his crime a campaign sticker. The violence drove an estimated 20,000 Zimbabweans to South Africa between 2010 and 2013, joining 2 million others in a desperate exodus. There, they faced xenophobia, living in shanties and scraping by as laborers, their dreams of home shattered. The brain drain was relentless. By 2015, the World Health Organization reported that 60% of Zimbabwe's healthcare workers had fled, leaving hospitals and clinics hollow. Teachers followed, and schools, once the pride of Zimbabwe's 90% literacy rate, struggled with skeleton staff. Children sat in overcrowded classrooms, their futures dimmed by a nation unraveling. The sanctions, meant to punish Mugabe's elite, became a cudgel that Mugabe wielded against his people, blaming the West for every shortage, every death. Mugabe's defiance rallied some, who saw him as a hero against imperialism. His land reforms, flawed as they were, resonated with those who remembered colonial theft. But the cost was undeniable. Critics like Justina Mokoko, a Zimbabwean activist, argued that Mugabe used Obama's sanctions as a scapegoat for his own corruption and mismanagement. The billions siphoned by ZANU-PF elites, documented by Transparency International, could have rebuilt hospitals and schools, but instead, they vanished into offshore accounts. By 2017, Mugabe's feud with Obama and the West weakened his grip. Regional leaders, like Botswana's Ian Khama, echoed Obama's calls for change, and a military coup ousted Mugabe in November, ending his 37-year reign. As tanks rolled into Harare, Zimbabweans celebrated, but their joy was tempered. The economy remained in tatters, the health system broken, and millions were still displaced. Mugabe's successor, Emmerson Mnangagwa, inherited a nation scarred by a feud that pitted pride against pragmatism. In the end, Mugabe's call for Obama to back off was a cry for sovereignty, but it came at a devastating price. While he stood firm, Zimbabweans starved, fled, and suffered, their dreams buried under the weight of a leader's defiance and a world's indifference. The feud was not just a clash of men but a tragedy for a nation, its people caught in a storm they did not create.